The grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched for 5 kilometers in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, and its ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds that mimicked the sky of 100 different worlds. 12,000 seats rose in perfect circles around a central platform, and every single seat was filled. Ambassador David Cole had never felt so small in his entire life. He stood on a platform barely 10 meters wide, surrounded by representatives from over 900 alien species. Some of them floated in anti-gravity fields. Others breathed through masks connected to portable atmosphere tanks. A few existed as nothing more than energy, patterns contained in magnetic bottles, and every single one of them was staring at him. The human delegation will now answer for its crimes, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. David looked up to see High Chancellor Veltris descending from a platform high above. The Chancellor was a massive creature, standing 4 meters tall, with 6 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. His species, the Nethrani, had ruled the Galactic Assembly for 3,000 years. David's heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. Behind him stood only 2 other humans, Commander Rachel Hayes, her military uniform crisp despite their 36-hour journey through hostile space, and Dr. Anton Marsh, clutching a data tablet that contained every piece of evidence they had managed to gather. 3 humans against 12,000 aliens. 3 humans representing 8 billion souls back on Earth. You stand accused, Chancellor Veltris continued, his voice booming through the chamber, of the destruction of 23 Dominion warships, the deaths of 6,000 Varkoth soldiers, and the use of forbidden weapons against a protected species. A holographic display materialized above the chamber. David watched as images appeared, showing the wreckage of alien vessels scattered across the space near Mars. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, destruction on a scale that made his stomach turn. How does the Terran delegation respond to these charges? David could feel Commander Hayes tense beside him. They had prepared for this moment for weeks. Every word had been rehearsed, every gesture planned, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of standing before the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. He stepped forward and spoke, clearly into the translator device at his caller. We respond with a question. The chamber exploded with noise. Thousands of alien voices rose in confusion and outrage. Several delegates actually stood from their seats, their translators struggling to convey their anger. Chancellor Veltris raised 2 of his 6 arms, and silence fell instantly. A question is not a plea, he said, his voice now dangerously soft. You will enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. Those are your only options. With respect, Chancellor, David replied, keeping his voice steady through sheer force of will. Our question is relevant to determining guilt. You see, we would like to know why the Varkoth attacked our colony on Mars in the first place. The silence that followed was absolute. David gestured to Dr. Marsh, who began uploading data to the chamber's display systems. The images of destroyed Varkoth ships were replaced by something else entirely. Video footage from New Oslo colony. The chamber watched as Varkoth soldiers descended on civilian habitations. Watched as they dragged screaming families from their homes. Watched as they began loading human beings into transport containers like cargo. 17 days ago, David said, the Varkoth Dominion attacked our colony without warning, without declaration of war, without any communication whatsoever. They killed 412 of our people in the initial assault, and then they began taking prisoners. He paused, letting the images speak for themselves. Not prisoners of war, not hostages for negotiation. They were taking our people for food. The chamber erupted again, But this time, the tone was different. David heard shock in those alien voices. Disgust, perhaps even fear. The Varkoth delegation rose from their seats. They were massive creatures, standing 3 meters tall, with thick armor plating, covering their bodies and jaws that could bite through steel. Their leader, a scarred warrior named General Krath, pushed his way to the front of their section. "These images are fabricated," Krath growled, his translator converting his rumbling speech into standard galactic common. "The humans are attempting to deceive this assembly. We came to their world on a peaceful diplomatic mission, and they attacked us without provocation." "Then explain this," David said. Dr. Marsh uploaded a new file. Audio recordings from the colony's emergency broadcast system. The chamber fell silent as they heard a human voice. Trembling with fear, but still speaking clearly, "This is Administrator Petra Lindgren of New Oslo Colony. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. They are not responding to any communication attempts. They are killing everyone they find. If anyone can hear this message, please send help. Please. They are eating us. They are eating our children. Please help us." The recording dissolved into static. "Administrator Lindgren survived," David said quietly. "She is one of 207 survivors out of a colony of 3,000. She watched the Varkoth devour her husband and her 6-year-old daughter." Commander Hayes stepped forward, her hand resting on a sealed container at her belt. Every soldier in the chamber immediately raised their weapons. "Stand down," Chancellor Velters commanded, though David noticed the Chancellor himself had moved several steps backward. "Commander Hayes, what is in that container?" Rachel smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "Evidence," she said, "of what happened when the Varkoth discovered that humans fight back." General Kraft made a sound that the translator rendered as a snarl. "We are the supreme predators of the galaxy. We have conquered 47 worlds. No species has ever successfully resisted us." "That was true," David agreed, "until you came to Earth." He nodded to Rachel, who began to unseal the container. And something strange happened. Every Varkoth in the chamber took a step backward. Their massive bodies, covered in armor that could withstand plasma fire, actually trembled. General Krath's jaw opened and closed without producing any sound. They were afraid. No, David realized. They were terrified. "What is in that container?" Chancellor Velters demanded again. David turned to face the assembly. 12,000 pairs of eyes focused on him. Some curious, some hostile, some confused. "You call us humans a primitive species," he said. "You look at our soft skin and our slow reflexes and our fragile bodies, and you assume we are weak." The Varkoth made that same assumption. They came to our world expecting easy prey. He gestured to the container in Rachel's hands. They discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about warfare. They discovered what happens when you attack a species that evolved on a Category 12 death world. Chancellor Veltris's color-shifting skin went pale. "That classification is not possible. No intelligent species could evolve on a world rated above Category 8. And yet," David said, "here we are." Rachel opened the container. Inside, suspended in a preservation field, was a small furry animal with 4 legs and a wagging tail. "A dog." The Varkoth delegation screamed. It was not a battle cry or a roar of defiance. It was pure, absolute terror. 12 massive warriors, each capable of tearing a human apart with their bare hands, scrambled over each other trying to get away from the platform. General Kraft actually knocked over 2 of his own soldiers in his desperate attempt to flee. The rest of the chamber watched in stunned silence. "This," David said calmly, "is a golden retriever named Max. He is 3 years old. He enjoys chasing balls and sleeping in sunbeams." Max wagged his tail and panted happily. completely unaware of the chaos around him. He is also the descendant of the most successful predator partnership in Earth's history. Humans and wolves joined forces 40,000 years ago. Together, we hunted every other species on our planet to the brink of extinction. Together, we became the apex predators of a world where everything was trying to kill us. Chancellor Veltris stared at the small animal. This creature terrified the Varkoth? No, David said. The creature did not terrify them. The creature reminded them of something else. Something they experienced when they came to New Oslo. Something that has haunted them ever since. He looked directly at the cowering Varkoth delegation. Max is not our weapon, Chancellor. Max is just a symbol. Our real weapon is something far more dangerous. And what is that? David Cole, ambassador of Earth, representative of a species that had only learned of alien life 5 years ago, smiled at the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. Us, the chamber fell silent. And in that silence, David could feel something changing. Something shifting in the way these ancient, powerful civilizations looked at the small, fragile creatures standing before them. For the first time in galactic history, they were beginning to understand. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was something much, much worse. 6 months earlier, the sky above New Oslo colony had been clear and full of stars. Lieutenant Marcus Torres stood on the observation deck of the colony's central hub, watching the distant lights of ships moving through the darkness. Most of them were mining vessels, hauling ore from the Aste. Royd belt back to Earth. A few were scientific expeditions, studying the mysteries of the outer solar system. None of them had any idea what was coming. Beautiful night, said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Elena Vasquez, the colony's head of security, walking toward him with 2 cups of coffee. She was a small woman with dark hair and tired eyes, but her voice was warm. Couldn't sleep, Marcus admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. Nobody can, Elena said. Ever since that transmission from Earth about first contact with aliens, everyone's been on edge. It had been 3 weeks since humanity learned it was not alone in the universe. 3 weeks since a crystalline ship had appeared above the United Nations building and changed everything. 3 weeks of diplomatic negotiations that Marcus only knew about through official bulletins. What he did know was that the talks were not going well. You think they're dangerous? Marcus asked. The aliens, I mean. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I think anything powerful enough to travel between stars could crush us like insects if it wanted to. The question is whether it wants to. A soft alarm began to chime on her communicator. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. What is it? Unknown vessels entering Mars orbit, she whispered. 23 of them. They're not responding to any communication attempts. The coffee cup slipped from Marcus's fingers. By the time he reached the command center, the colony was already in chaos. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Families rushed toward the emergency shelters, parents carrying crying children, elderly residents struggling to keep up. Administrator Petra Lindgren stood at the central console, her face illuminated by dozens of warning lights. She was a tall woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her voice was the only calm thing in the room. Get me a visual on those ships, she ordered. The main screen flickered. And then Marcus saw them. They were unlike anything in human records. Massive vessels, each one at least a kilometer long, covered in dark armor plating that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in perfect formation, descending toward the colony with terrible purpose. Those are Varkoth warships, Elena said, her voice hollow. I recognize them from the briefing files Earth sent us. They're supposed to be one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Why are they here? Petra demanded. We have no quarrel with the Varkoth. We've never even made contact with them. The answer came moments later. When the first drop pods began falling from the sky, Marcus watched through the observation windows as dozens of armored capsules screamed through the thin Martian atmosphere. They crashed into the ground around the colony, throwing up clouds of red dust. And then the doors opened. The Varkoth were monsters. They stood 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural armor that looked like polished stone. Their heads were flat and wide, with jaws that stretched across their entire faces, filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. Their forearms ended in claws that could cut through steel, and there were hundreds of them. All security personnel to defensive positions, Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Evacuate all civilians to the underground shelters. This is not a drill. The next hour was a nightmare. Marcus found himself in a corridor near the colony's eastern entrance, crouched behind a barricade made of overturned furniture, firing his plasma pistol at creatures that barely seemed to notice. The Varkoth shrugged off hits that should have killed them. They moved through the colony like a flood, unstoppable and merciless. He watched 3 of his fellow security officers die in the first 10 minutes. One of them, a young woman named Catherine, who had joined the service only 6 months ago, was torn in half by a Varkoth warrior before she could even raise her weapon. But something strange began to happen as the battle continued. The Varkoth were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like predators. They would kill their victims, yes, but then they would stop. They would examine the bodies with what Marcus could only describe as curiosity. And then they would begin to feed. He saw a Varkoth warrior lift a dead colonist to its massive jaws and bite down. He saw another dragging 2 unconscious civilians toward a transport container. He heard the screams of people being eaten alive, and something inside Marcus Torres changed. He had been afraid. Of course, he had been afraid. Any sane person would be terrified facing creatures like these. But as he watched his friends being devoured, as he heard the cries of children being dragged from their hiding places, the fear transformed into something else, not rage, not pure, absolute, burning rage. He stopped hiding behind the barricade. He stopped trying to find cover. He picked up a metal pipe from the debris around him and charged directly at the nearest Varkoth warrior. The creature saw him coming. Its translator device rendered its clicking laugh into a sound of contempt. A soft, weak human running toward it with nothing but a piece of metal. What could possibly be more pathetic? The Varkoth raised one massive arm to swat Marcus aside, and Marcus ducked under the blow, drove the pipe into the gap between the creature's armor plates, and twisted. The Varkoth screamed. It was a sound of pure shock, pure disbelief. It staggered backward, dark blood pouring from the wound. And for a single moment, Marcus saw something in its eyes that he had never expected to see. Fear. The creature was afraid of him. Across the colony, similar scenes were playing out. Elena Vasquez, wounded in 3 places, still fighting. A 60-year-old farmer named William Grant, charging into a group of Varkoth with nothing but a plasma cutter. A teenage girl named Iris, leading other children through ventilation shafts, while her mother drew the aliens away. The colonists should have been easy prey. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely outmatched in physical combat. But they refused to stop fighting, and the Varkoth did not understand. Their species had evolved as apex predators on a world where every other creature fled or submitted. Their entire psychology was built around the assumption that prey behaved like prey. When threatened, prey ran. When cornered, prey surrendered. When outmatched, prey died quietly. Humans did none of these things. Humans kept fighting even when they were bleeding out. Humans attacked even when they had no chance of winning. Humans screamed defiance even as they were being torn apart. And for the first time in their species' history, the Varkoth felt something they had never experienced before. Terror. Marcus tracked a group of Varkoth through the colony's maintenance tunnels for 3 hours. He was wounded. He was exhausted. He had no backup and almost no weapons. But he refused to stop Dot when he finally cornered them in a dead-end corridor. There were 4 of them. Each one was twice his size and covered in armor that could deflect plasma fire. They should have killed him in seconds. Instead, they froze. How? One of them clicked, its translator converting the sound into words. How are you still alive? We killed you. We saw you fall. I got better, Marcus said Dot, and he attacked. The battle was brutal. Marcus took wounds that should have killed him 3 times over. He fought with a broken arm, a collapsed lung, and a piece of Varkoth claw lodged in his shoulder. But he never stopped moving. He never stopped fighting. When it was over, 3 Varkoth warriors lay dead at his feet. The 4th ran. Elsewhere in the colony, Administrator Petra Lindgren was recording her final transmission. The emergency shelter was compromised. The Varkoth had broken through the outer doors. In minutes, they would reach the last survivors. If anyone can hear this message, she said into the recorder, her voice trembling, please understand what happened here. They came to feed on us. They thought we were cattle, but we showed them otherwise. She paused, listening to the sounds of claws scraping against metal. Tell Earth. Tell them what we learned. The Varkoth are not afraid of weapons. They are not afraid of ships. They are afraid of us. They are afraid of what we become when we have nothing left to lose. The doors burst open. Petra Lindgren picked up the plasma rifle from the floor beside her. It had 1 shot left. We are not prey, she said, and charged. 6 months later, in the Galactic Assembly Chamber, Ambassador David Cole presented this footage to 12,000 alien representatives. The chamber was silent. 207 survivors, David said quietly, out of 3,000 colonists. We lost 93% of our people in that attack. He turned to face the Varkoth delegation. But you lost something more. You lost the certainty that you were the most dangerous things in the galaxy. You lost the belief that humans would submit. And you lost 17 of your best warriors to a wounded security officer armed with a metal pipe. General Krath's massive form was trembling. His translator struggled to convey the emotion in his voice. You are monsters, he said. David shook his head. No, we are exactly what you made us. You came to our world thinking you would find food. You found something else entirely. He looked around the chamber at the thousands of watching. Aliens, you found a species that does not know how to surrender. And the galaxy began to understand what it meant to awaken a Deathworlder. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the Terran warship Vengeance, watching Earth grow smaller in the rear display screens. Behind her, 16 other vessels followed in tight formation, their hulls painted black, their weapons primed for battle. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled for combat, and it was about to face an enemy that outgunned them by a factor of 800 to 1. Admiral, said her tactical officer, a young man named James Whitmore. Long-range sensors confirmed the Varkoth fleet holding position near the asteroid belt. 23 vessels, mostly heavy cruisers. Their firepower estimates are not encouraging. I didn't ask for encouraging, Helena replied. I asked for accurate. She was 62 years old, a veteran of 3 conflicts on Earth before the discovery of alien life. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age and worry, and her left arm was a prosthetic replacement for the one she had lost in the Pacific War. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that somewhere ahead, 23 alien warships waited for them. And somewhere on those ships, the beings who had murdered 3,000 human colonists were preparing to do it again. Time to intercept? 12 hours at current speed, Admiral. Helena nodded. Then we have 12 hours to figure out how to kill them. The plan they developed was insane by any standard military doctrine. Human ships were smaller, slower, and less armed than anything in the Varkoth fleet. A direct confrontation would be suicide. The Varkoth had plasma cannons that could punch through their hulls from 1,000 kilometers away. They had shields that could deflect anything humanity possessed. They had warriors bred for combat over millions of years of evolution. But they also had a weakness. Commander Rachel Hayes, transferred to the fleet specifically for this mission, explained it to the assembled officers in the briefing room. The Varkoth are a hive species, she said, pointing to biological data on the main screen. Not truly hive-minded, but close. They share emotional states through pheromone communication. When one Varkoth feels fear, every Varkoth in the immediate area feels it too. So if we can make some of them afraid, James Whitmore said slowly, they all become afraid. Exactly. Their military structure compensates for this by including specially trained units called anchors. These individuals are conditioned to suppress fear responses and stabilize the emotional state of nearby warriors. So we kill the anchors first. That is the first step, Rachel agreed. But it is not enough. Even without anchors, the Varkoth will only feel mild unease. To trigger a true panic response, we need to expose them to something that activates their deep evolutionary fear programming. She pulled up a new image. It showed a small, furry animal with pointed ears and forward-facing eyes. This is a Terran carnivore called a domestic cat. On Earth, it is considered a household pet. To the Varkoth, it represents their species' oldest nightmare. Admiral Vance leaned forward. Explain. The Varkoth evolved on a world dominated by ambush predators. Small, patient hunters who would track their prey for hours before striking from concealment. The Varkoth developed their armor plating specifically as a defense against these creatures. And even though they eventually drove those predators to extinction, the instinctive fear remains. She showed them a recording from the attack on New Oslo. A Varkoth warrior, massive and terrifying, freezing in place as a small house cat wandered past. The scent of Terran predators triggers an involuntary fear response in Varkoth soldiers. Combined with the removal of their anchors and the presence of actively hostile humans, we believe we can induce a full psychological collapse. Admiral Vance was silent for a long moment. You want us to win this battle, she said finally, with cats and dogs and any other Terran predator we can bring. But mostly, Admiral, we want to win this battle with fear. The plan was put into action over the following 12 hours. Human. Ships approached the Varkoth fleet under a flag of diplomacy. General Croft, commanding from his flagship Devourer of Worlds, agreed to receive a human delegation. He was curious about these soft creatures who had somehow killed 17 of his warriors. He wanted to understand them before he destroyed them. It was the last mistake he ever made. Commander Rachel Hayes led a team of 6 humans onto the Varkoth flagship. They wore diplomatic clothing and carried no visible weapons. They looked exactly like what the Varkoth expected. Weak, frightened prey animals trying to negotiate their survival. But each of them carried something hidden. Small vials filled with concentrated scent compounds, extracted from every predator species on Earth. Wolves, lions, tigers, bears, hundreds of thousands of years of predator evolution, distilled into a chemical form that would penetrate Varkoth armor and reach the primitive fear centers of their brains. The meeting took place in the Devourer's main command chamber. General Croft sat on a throne made from the bones of conquered species, surrounded by his most elite warriors. He looked at the tiny humans standing before him and felt nothing but contempt. You wish to surrender, he rumbled. That is wise. We will make your deaths quick as a reward for your submission. Rachel bowed her head, the perfect image of a defeated creature. We ask only for mercy, great general. We are small and weak. We cannot resist your power. No, Krath agreed, you cannot. He raised one massive arm to signal his warriors, and the vials activated. The effect was not immediate. The scent compounds took several seconds to spread through the chamber's atmosphere. But when they reached the first Varkoth warrior, the reaction was instantaneous. The warrior screamed. Not a battle cry. Not a roar of challenge. A scream of pure, primal terror. It was as if something had reached into his brain and activated every fear response simultaneously. He fell to the ground, clawing at his own armor, trying to escape from a threat that he could not see. And because the Varkoth shared emotions through pheromones, his terror spread. Within seconds, every warrior in the chamber was screaming. General Krath himself was pressed against his throne, his massive body shaking, his eyes wide with horror. What have you done? He managed to gasp. Rachel Hayes removed her diplomatic robe, revealing the combat armor underneath. Around her, the other 5 humans were doing the same. We have reminded you, she said calmly, what it feels like to be prey. The Battle of the Belt, as it would come to be called, lasted exactly 47 minutes. While Rachel's team held the Varkoth command structure in a state of psychological collapse, the Terran fleet struck. Human ships moved through the Varkoth formation like ghosts, targeting specific vessels with surgical precision. Not the biggest ships, not the most heavily armed. The anchor vessels. Each Varkoth fleet included specialized craft, carrying trained psychological stabilizers. Without them, the fear would spread through the entire fleet, ship to ship, warrior to warrior. One by one, the anchor vessels fell, and the Varkoth began to break. Admiral Vance watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as Varkoth cruisers collided with each other in their panic. She saw warriors abandoning their weapons, clawing at airlocks, trying to escape into the vacuum of space rather than face the terror that gripped them. Admiral, James Whitmore said quietly, they're surrendering. On all frequencies. They're begging us to stop. Helena looked at the display. 17 human ships. 23 Varkoth warships, most of them now disabled or destroyed. Thousands of enemy soldiers, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, helpless with fear. All ships, she commanded, cease fire. The silence that followed was absolute. When it was over, humanity had lost 3 vessels and 412 personnel. The Varkoth had lost everything. 14 ships destroyed, 7 captured. 2 escaped to carry word back to their homeworld. Over 4,000 warriors dead, and the survivors too traumatized to fight. In the captured vessels. Human soldiers walked through corridors filled with Varkoth, who could do nothing but cower. These creatures who had eaten human children, who had treated humanity as nothing more than food, now trembled at the approach of beings half their size. Lieutenant Marcus Torres recovered from his wounds at New Oslo and transferred to the fleet specifically for this mission, stood over General Krath in the captured command chamber. The massive Varkoth was curled into a ball on the floor, whimpering. Please, Krath begged. Please make it stop. I can still smell them. I can still feel them watching me. Marcus knelt beside the fallen general. That feeling, he said quietly, is what 3,000 of my people felt when you came to our colony. That fear you cannot escape is what our children experienced before you ate them alive. He stood. Remember it. Remember it for the rest of your life. And remember this. If you ever come near human space again, we will make what happened today feel like mercy. He walked away, leaving General Krath whimpering in the dark. And across the galaxy, word began to spread. The Varkoth had been defeated, not by superior technology, not by overwhelming numbers, not by ancient military tradition, not by fear. And the species that had defeated them were called humans. The other civilizations of the galaxy many of whom had lived under Varkoth predation for centuries, began to pay very close attention. The Galactic Assembly Chamber had never been so silent. 12,000 representatives from 900 species sat frozen in their seats, processing what they had just witnessed. The footage from the Battle of the Belt played on endless loop above the central platform, showing Varkoth warriors fleeing in terror, massive warships colliding with each other, and small human vessels moving through the chaos like sharks through a school of fish. High Chancellor Veltris finally spoke, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We require an explanation." Ambassador David Cole nodded. "Of course, Chancellor. Dr. Marsh?" Dr. Anton Marsh stepped forward, his tablet already projecting data into the air around him. He was a xenobiologist, one of the first humans to study alien life forms, and he had spent the last 3 months analyzing everything humanity had learned about galactic civilizations. "The key to understanding what happened," he began, "is evolution." He pulled up a diagram showing brain structures across dozens of species. Every intelligent species in this chamber evolved on what you call Category 1 through Category 8 worlds. These are planets with stable climates, predictable ecosystems, and relatively low levels of environmental danger. Your evolution selected for intelligence, cooperation, and threat avoidance. "This is basic xenobiology," one delegate called out. "Every child knows this." "Yes, but what you may not realize is how thoroughly this shaped your psychology. When you encounter a threat, your biology responds in a specific way. Your higher cognitive functions shut down. Your bodies enter a freeze or flee state. You become purely reactive, driven by instinct." Dr. Marsh changed the display to show human brain scans. Humans evolved differently. Our homeworld, Earth, is classified as a Category 12 death world. The gravity is crushing by most standards. The atmosphere contains a corrosive gas you call oxygen. The surface is covered with liquid water at temperatures that would kill most galactic species instantly. And our ecosystem, he continued, was an endless war of survival. Every species on Earth evolved in competition with every other species. Predators hunted prey. Prey evolved defenses. Predators evolved counters. For 4 billion years, this arms race continued without interruption. Humans emerged from this environment as persistence predators. We developed a hunting strategy unlike anything else in the galaxy. We did not chase prey until we caught it. We followed prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We walked our food to death. The chamber stirred uneasily. This required specific adaptations. We developed the ability to regulate our body temperature through sweating, allowing us to remain active in heat that would kill other predators. We developed long-distance vision that could track prey across kilometers. And most importantly, we developed the ability to suppress our fear response and continue functioning under extreme stress. You call this ability courage. The word hung in the air. Several translators struggled to render it into their respective languages. Most species in this chamber cannot experience courage the way humans do, Dr. Marsh explained. When you are afraid, your bodies force you to react. You cannot choose to push through the fear. Your biology makes that choice for you. Humans are different. We feel fear. We feel it intensely. But we evolved the capacity to acknowledge that fear and act despite it. We can be terrified and still fight. We can be wounded and still advance. We can watch our friends die and still refuse to surrender. He turned to face the Varkoth delegation, who had been allowed to return to their seats under heavy guard. The Varkoth came to our colony expecting prey. They found something else. They found a species that does not stop fighting simply because it is outmatched. They found creatures who became more dangerous as the situation grew more desperate. And when they tried to treat us like cattle, they triggered the one response they were completely unprepared. For Dr. Marsh's voice grew quiet. We hunted them back. The implications rippled through the chamber. A delegate from a species called the Talani, small crystalline beings who had lived under Varko threat for centuries, raised a trembling appendage. "You are saying," she said carefully, "that humans cannot be frightened into submission?" "We can be frightened," David Cole answered. "We feel fear like any other species. But fear does not control us. It does not make our decisions for us. If anything, fear tends to make us more determined." "That is impossible," the Talani delegate whispered. "And yet," Commander Rachel Has said, stepping forward with Max the golden retriever padding along beside her, "here we stand." The chamber began to dissolve into chaos. Delegates were shouting questions, demanding clarifications, expressing disbelief. Chancellor Veltris struggled to maintain order, but beneath the noise, something else was happening. The smaller species, the ones who had spent generations living in fear of the Varkoth, and others like them, were exchanging glances. They were looking at the humans with something that was not quite hope, but close to it. A delegate from a species called this Narati approached the human platform during the recess. He was a tall, slender being with iridescent scales and eyes that showed ancient exhaustion. "I must ask you something," he said quietly. "Of course," David replied. "My species has been prey for the Varkoth for 800 years. They take 10% of our population every generation as tribute. If we resist, they take more. We have tried to fight. We have tried to hide. Nothing works." He leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "Can you teach us? Can you teach us to be like you?" David looked at the alien for a long moment. Behind those iridescent eyes, he saw centuries of suffering. He saw a species that had forgotten what it felt like to not be afraid. "I do not know if we can teach courage," he admitted. "It may be something that only evolves over millions of years on a death world. But we can try. We can share what we know. And maybe, together, we can find a way." The Narati's eyes widened. "You would help us, even though we have nothing to offer in return?" David smiled. "We are not helping you because you can give us something. We are helping you because it is the right thing to do. On Earth, we call this principle simple. When you see someone being hurt, you try to stop it. When you see injustice, you fight against it. Not because you will gain something, because that is what good people do." The Narati stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "I do not understand," he said finally. "Your species confuses me deeply." "We confuse ourselves most of the time," David admitted. "But we have found that confusion is better than certainty when the certain path leads to cruelty." By the time the session resumed, the political landscape of the galaxy had begun to shift. The Varkoth had been the enforcer species of a coalition called the Dominion for thousands of years. Their strength, their invincibility, their terror had kept dozens of civilizations in line. Now that invincibility had been shattered, and the cracks were spreading. 3 species announced their withdrawal from the Dominion before the session even officially reconvened. 7 more were rumored to be considering it. The balance of power that had held the galaxy together for millennia was crumbling dot, and at the center of it all stood 3 humans, representatives of a species that had only learned of alien life 5 years ago. "The Dominion demands justice," announced a delegate from a species called the Vethrani, the political leaders of the coalition. "The humans have committed acts of war against a member species. They must be punished." Chancellor Veltris turned to the human delegation. "Ambassador Cole, how do you respond?" David stood slowly, straightening his suit. "The Dominion demands justice," he repeated. "Very well. Let us discuss justice." He gestured, and Dr. Marsh began displaying new information. The Dominion has existed for 4,000 years. In that time, your member species have enslaved 112 civilizations. You have harvested intelligent beings for food on 47 occasions. You have committed genocide against 6 species who resisted your rule. These are lies, the Vethrani delegate sputtered. These are your own records, David said calmly. Recovered from captured Varkoth vessels. Encrypted? Yes, but human cryptographers are very good at their jobs. The chamber exploded. David waited until the noise subsided before continuing. The Dominion speaks of justice. But there is no justice in a system where the strong devour the weak without consequence. There is no justice in a galaxy where species like the Narati must sacrifice their children to monsters. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species both powerful and weak. Humanity did not come to the stars seeking war. We came seeking knowledge, seeking connection, seeking a place among the community of civilizations. But we will not stand by while innocents suffer. We will not close our eyes to cruelty. And we will not bow to anyone who thinks that might makes right. The Dominion threatens us with punishment. Very well, we are not afraid. We were born on a death world where everything tried to kill us. We survived by refusing to surrender. So here is our response to your demands. He pointed directly at the Vethrani delegate. Come and take your justice. Come with your fleets and your armies and your warriors. Come with everything you have, and we will show you what we showed the Varkoth. We will show you what fear really means. The chamber fell absolutely silent, and in that silence, the first cracks in the Dominion's power became visible to Ever. YONE. Because for the first time in 4,000 years, the galaxy had found something more terrifying than the Dominion. It had found humans. 1 year later, the Galactic Assembly Chamber looked completely different. The section that had once belonged to the Dominion now sat empty, its seats gathering dust. The Varkoth had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely, their species too traumatized to participate in interstellar affairs. The Vethrani had been overthrown by their own population after the true extent of Dominion atrocities became public. In their place, new delegations had arrived. Species that had lived in fear for generations now sent their first representatives to speak in the assembly. The Narati, the Talani, dozens of others who had once been prey, now standing as equals. And at the center of the chamber, a new platform had been constructed, larger than the old one, large enough to hold not 3 humans, but 30. Ambassador David Cole stood at the front of the Terran delegation, watching as Chancellor Veltris called the session to order. The Chancellor's color-shifting skin moved through patterns of cautious respect, a far cry from the contempt he had displayed a year ago. The Assembly recognizes the representative of the Terran Alliance, Veltris announced. David stepped forward. Thank you, Chancellor. I am pleased to report on the progress of the Courage Initiative. Behind him, a massive display activated, showing images from across the galaxy. A Narati training facility, where alien soldiers practiced pushing through their fear responses under the guidance of human instructors. A Talani research laboratory, where scientists worked to develop psychological conditioning techniques adapted to crystalline biology. A joint fleet exercise, where ships from a dozen species practiced the tactics that humans had used at the Battle of the Belt. In the past 12 months, we have established training programs on 47 worlds. We have developed fear management techniques compatible with over 60 different biologies. And we have begun to see results. He gestured to a Narati soldier standing in the delegation behind him. The alien stepped forward, her iridescent scales catching the chamber's light. I am Combat Specialist Vara of the Narati Defense Force, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 6 months ago, I completed the first Terran Courage training program. Last month, I led a team against a Varkoth raiding party that attacked our border colony. She paused. We won. The chamber erupted in shocked murmuring. The Varkoth, even in their diminished state, were still considered among the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The idea that prey species could defeat them was almost unthinkable. The Varkoth were stronger than us, Vara continued. They were faster. They were better armed. And when they attacked, I felt fear. I felt it more intensely than I have ever felt anything in my life. But I did not freeze. I did not run. I remembered my training. I remembered what the humans taught us, that fear is not your master unless you let it be. And I fought. We all fought. And the Varkoth ran from us. The silence that followed was different from the silences that had filled this chamber a year ago. It was not the silence of shock or fear. It was the silence of something new being born. Chancellor Veltries spoke carefully. You are saying that you have found a way to teach courage to species that do not naturally possess it? David shook his head. Not exactly. We cannot give you courage. We can only help you find the courage you already have. Explain. Every species in this chamber has the capacity for courage. It is built into your biology, even if it is usually suppressed. What we teach is not a new ability, but a new way of accessing an ability you were born with. He pulled up comparative data on the display. When a Narati faces danger, her body produces specific chemicals that trigger the freeze response. This is involuntary. But we have discovered that certain mental techniques, combined with specific physical training, can allow individuals to redirect that chemical response. Instead of freezing, they channel the energy into action. It is not easy. It requires months of intensive training, and it does not work for everyone. But for those who succeed, the results speak for themselves. Vara nodded. I still fear, but now I control it instead of it controlling me. And that makes all the difference. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species were skeptical. They argued that humans were unique, that their death world biology could not be replicated. They pointed out that courage training had only produced results in a handful of individuals, not entire populations. Others were hopeful. They spoke of the suffering their species had endured, the generations lost to predator species, the children sacrificed to maintain peace. They asked, even if only a few of us can learn, is that not better than none? But the most powerful argument came from an unexpected source. A Varkoth representative had been allowed to attend the session, speaking from a remote facility where he was being held in comfortable detention. His name was Krath Jr., the son of General Krath, and he had spent the past year trying to understand what had happened to his father. I must speak, he said, his image appearing on the main display. Chancellor Veltries hesitated, then nodded. My species believed we were the supreme predators of the galaxy, Krath Jr. said. We believed that strength was the only law, that the weak existed to serve the strong. This belief was taught to us from birth. It defined everything we were, and then we met humans. His massive form trembled slightly. My father was the greatest warrior of our generation. He had conquered worlds. He had never known defeat. And a human named Marcus Torres, armed with nothing but a metal pipe, broke him. Not physically. My father could have killed that human with a single blow. But something about the encounter shattered him in ways I still do not understand. He has not spoken since that day. He simply sits and stares at nothing. I came here seeking understanding. I have studied humans. I have read your history. I have watched your entertainment media, and I have reached a conclusion that terrifies me. He leaned forward, his eyes filling the display. You are not the monsters we thought you were. You are worse. You are beings who choose to face their fears. You are beings who could surrender and save yourselves, but choose to fight instead. You are beings who will sacrifice everything for principles that bring you no practical benefit. We cannot defeat you, not because you are stronger or faster or more numerous. We cannot defeat you because you do not play by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. You have found a way to turn weakness into strength, fear into fury, defeat into defiance. And now you are teaching this to others. He was silent for a moment. My species' dominance is over. I accept that. But I came here to issue a warning. Not a threat, but a genuine warning. What you are creating will change everything. A galaxy where the weak can fight back is a galaxy where power means nothing. A galaxy where prey becomes predator is a galaxy of endless war. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared for a universe where everyone can be as terrible as you? David Cole stepped forward to respond. That is exactly what we are prepared for, he said quietly. Because a galaxy of beings who can all fight back is a galaxy where no one has to be prey. A galaxy where everyone has courage is a galaxy where oppression becomes impossible. Yes, there will be conflicts. Yes, there will be wars. Humans know more about war than any species in this chamber. We have been killing each other for our entire existence. But we have also learned something else. We have learned that the only way to end cycles of violence is to make violence unprofitable. When the weak can fight, the strong must negotiate. When everyone has courage, nobody can rule through fear. That is the galaxy we are trying to build. Not a galaxy of human dominance, but a galaxy of universal equality. Not a galaxy where humanity is the only power, but a galaxy where every species has the power to defend itself. He looked around the chamber. We came to the stars 5 years ago, knowing nothing of what awaited us. We found a galaxy ruled by fear, where the strong devoured the weak without consequence. We could have accepted our place. We could have submitted. We could have become what the Dominion expected us to become. Instead, we chose to fight. And now we are offering that choice to everyone else. The vote was called 3 hours later. The Terran Alliance proposal, as it came to be called, established a new principle in galactic law, the right of resistance. Every species had the right to defend itself. Every species had the right to learn courage. Every species had the right to stand without fear. The vote was not unanimous. 49 delegations voted against it, mostly former Dominion members who feared what would happen when their former subjects could fight back. But 872 delegations voted in favor, and as the results were announced, as the chamber erupted in celebration, a species who had lived in terror for millennia finally saw a path to freedom. Ambassador David Cole allowed himself a small smile. He thought of New Oslo. He thought of the 3,000 colonists who had died there, including his own sister. He thought of Administrator Petra Lindgren charging into Varkoth warriors with a single shot left in her rifle. We are not prey, she had said. And finally, the galaxy believed her. On Earth, in a military cemetery overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a memorial stood for the colonists of New Oslo. Lieutenant Marcus Torres visited every year on the anniversary of the attack. He stood before the stone bearing his sister Catherine's name and remembered her face. A young woman approached him. She was not human. Her iridescent scales marked her as Narati, and the insignia on her uniform showed she was a graduate of the Courage Training Program. "You are Lieutenant Torres," she said, "the one who fought General Krath with a metal pipe." Marcus nodded. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Your story inspired me to volunteer for the program. Your example showed me that even the weakest can become strong." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I was not strong," he said finally. "I was terrified. Every moment of that fight, I was certain I was going to die. But you fought anyway. Yes, that is the definition of courage. Marcus looked at her, at this alien soldier who had traveled across the galaxy to learn what humans knew by instinct. He saw in her eyes the same light he had seen in his fellow colonists on that terrible day, the light of beings who had decided that they would rather die fighting than live as prey. "Welcome to the family," he said, and across the galaxy, in training facilities and military academies, in homes and schools and government halls. That family continued to grow. Species who had lived in fear for generations were learning to stand. Species who had been prey were becoming predators. And in the dark spaces between the stars, the remaining powers of the old order looked at what humanity had created and felt something they had never expected to feel. Fear, not of human weapons, not of human ships, not of human strength. Fear of a galaxy where everyone could be as dangerous as the species from the death world called Earth. Fear of a galaxy where nobody was prey anymore. And that, Ambassador David Cole thought as he watched the sun set over the Pacific, was exactly the point the galaxy had asked. What made humans so dangerous? The answer was simple. They had taught the universe to fight back.